Welcome back to another episode of the Chase Joy podcast. My name is Flor. If you're new here, you are so welcomed in our community. If you are not and you're returning, thank you for coming back and listening to another episode. Before we get started, I want to go over a little bit about what's on my heart this week. I have been a little weary. I'll tell you in what aspect. So when I started this podcast, the first thought that I had was just fear. I was feeling fearful of putting myself out there, of talking about my faith boldly. The second thing that followed was the feeling of not being good enough, of not knowing enough. Who am I to talk about this stuff? And although I have known God, I feel like getting to know him personally and having that relationship, it's such a new feeling. I think part of where I'm being led to when it comes to this podcast is taking you guys along for the journey and showing the vulnerable part of starting something in obedience, even when you don't feel that you're ready. I definitely feel that from time to time, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't do it. And of course, God reminds me that's why you're here. You're not gonna have it all figured out. That's why God is telling me to lean on him and trust him. But this week, the thought that has been on my mind has been more of this feeling of responsibility for having a podcast where I'm talking about God. I don't ever want to misinterpret or change the word for my thoughts or my interpretation of the word that may lead somebody the wrong way. It's a huge responsibility and I don't take that lightly. And so when it comes to my faith, because it's something that is so personal, it's a relationship between me and God, but I'm now taking you guys on the journey with me because I understand what it feels to be a non-believer and then becoming a believer, and then going from being a lukewarm Christian and now feeling like I want a relationship with God and being open with the process of showing other people what that's like and putting it on display on a podcast or YouTube or social media. And all of those things are not for it to glorify me. Not at all. I want to show you that it's okay to take that step. It's okay to do this and to not know it all and to seek wisdom and to read the word and to pray continuously. That's what I want to show on this podcast. Last week on my way home from work, I had this heaviness and I was praying and this song came on and it made me cry. It made me think, God, I just want to know you. I want to be more like you. I want to do things for you and for you only, God. And I think that so many of us that have a platform, or even those that are wanting a platform and starting something new like a podcast or social media account, or they start some sort of ministry, it becomes a very fine line between doing it for God and then putting your own selfish desires into it. It's really hard when there's all of these pressures that come from the outside world that make you focus on the wrong thing. For example, just the podcast by itself. As soon as you post every day on Spotify, you're given all of these analytics. When you post on YouTube, you're going to be given analytics with the views and the number of people that follow you and all of that. And it is so easy to fall into the trap of looking at those numbers and then focusing on those numbers and forgetting that I need to focus on God alone. I want to do this for him only and not for the follows or the likes or the comments. Does it feel good that somebody was impacted in a positive way with what I said? Absolutely, it feels great. But ultimately, it's not for my emotional well-being. That's not why I'm doing this podcast. I'm doing it so others can also feel the joy and the peace that I'm feeling, but for them to experience it themselves by having a relationship with God. And so when I'm prepping for the episodes, I have been really trying to be in his presence before I start to write, because it needs to come from a place where it's him leading me to talk about certain topics. So my biggest prayer that I've had this week has been to have God really take away all selfish desires. God, strip me of it. If this podcast is not the thing that you want me to do, take it away. I really don't want it if it's not his will. I think because I've been in social media for the past, 3-4 years, it's so easy to get caught up in the trends. I catch myself scrolling on social media and seeing the trends. I don't want to get caught up in the analytics. I don't want to get caught up in what everybody else is doing. I do not want that. I want it to just be about him. And so again, the responsibility of talking about my faith online, I just want to tell you guys that I don't take this lightly at all. There's preparation that comes with this. There's prayer that comes with it. I don't put it on video, but I pray before I start recording. Another thing that I have been feeling a guilt of not spending as much time as I would want with God. I've mentioned in previous episodes how I'm a mom of 3. I have a husband. I have a job. I have a lot of responsibilities like most of us do. And doing this podcast is not my full-time job. I do this on Mondays and Fridays on the days that I'm off from work. I'm not getting paid for this. It's a lot of preparation that comes with it. And just the recording, the editing, making social media clips, the preparation of the episode itself, and all of the prayer that comes before I even get to prepare it. All of that is a lot. But I have been feeling that I don't want to let go of the time that I'm spending with the Lord. I wake up at about 4:20, 4:30 every morning. I used to exercise first and then I would get in the Word, but I have recently switched that up and it's really been working for me. I really enjoy it. But the feeling that I'm getting is almost a feeling of guilt that I wish I had more time. God, how do I get more time to just spend in your Word? I know that there's devotionals. I know that there's prayer that I can do. Like all of those things I'm already doing. And I know God sees that. And I know that he knows my heart. But the other part of me just really wants to be able to have like hours in the day to just sit and read the Bible and study it and learn. This week alone, I've probably researched either some sort of online study or a group that I can belong to or Bible school. I've looked up so many things this week alone so that I can get to know God more. God, how do I do it? How do I do it? And as I was preparing for this episode this morning, I was praying and I was thinking about how I enjoyed this time this morning where I had more time, and I'm making a plan of how I want to proceed with my Bible study and all of these things. But I was thinking about it. And in relation to what I was saying earlier about how I don't want to focus on the analytics and how last week I got distracted and I was looking at analytics and what so-and-so is doing and what this person is doing and what's popping off on social media. And I felt a word from God to tell me, stop. If you want more time with me, you have the time. You just have to stop focusing on the wrong thing. Fix your eyes on me, and I will give you the wisdom that you desire. I will give you the time that you're needing, but fix your eyes on me. And so this week, I really want to be intentional with my time. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't go out very much. I'm home a lot. It's either I'm with my kids or I'm just home. And it's a season of my life where it's busy. And I feel like God is telling me, if you desire more time with me, it's there. You just got to look for it. You got to find the times in your day where you're getting distracted and wasting time on other things and not coming back to me and spending time with me. There is no right or wrong time of how much time you should be spending with God. And if you're somebody like me that's feeling you're not doing enough, God knows your heart. And if you ask God for time, he's going to show you. Like he showed me literally just this morning. Yeah, you have time. All you got to do is you got to put your phone down And you got to get in the word and read during those times that you would have normally spent doing other things. Our society is wanting to have something going on all the time, or we need to be distracted all the time. And the more we do that, the less we hear him. And the more we do that, the less we get to meditate on the word and see things for what they are. And that was just really big conviction that I had today. But yeah, so anyways, let's get started with today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about waiting on God. Have you ever been in a season where you are waiting on God to answer prayer, waiting on him to heal you of something, to move on your behalf, to open doors? I feel like most of us are going to be falling into a waiting season pretty much our entire lives. There's going to be a time to sow and a time to reap and a time for harvest. But sometimes during that waiting season is where we are going to be challenged. There's going to be trials and there's going to be tribulations, and there's going to be a lot of growing during this time. Today, I want to talk about what that waiting season is about, what we can learn from the waiting season, and just why there is a waiting season and why God puts us through those seasons in our lives. Lamentations 3:25 says, "The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord." And waiting on God requires stillness. I feel for most of us, especially in this fast-paced life, it is really hard to be still. We are caught up in the busyness of life, in the responsibilities, in the paying of the bills and the going to work and the next thing that we don't have time to be still and to listen and to wait on him and his voice. And to wait on the Lord is to put all of your hope and your trust that he will come through, that he will answer when the time is right. We're waiting for him to deliver us from something, whether that's a situation that's causing us worry, or if it's to resolve or remove a situation. Sometimes it can mean for him to deliver us from guilt or the power of evil, to help us break free from addictions, from anger, from resentment, from unforgiveness. All of those things we can be delivered from. But waiting is hard. Why is waiting so hard? I feel like when we are waiting, we are often not doing anything. We are in stillness. And I think even more so, it's hard because we don't see him doing anything. But here's the thing, waiting on him is having trust and faith that he is working on your behalf even when you don't see him. It means completely surrendering control to him and knowing that he will do what is in his will for your life. Having that hope and confidence that he knows best for you. It means that we must rely on his power alone because we cannot do it by ourselves. During these seasons of waiting, we can often say, "God, where are you? Why don't you get me out of this situation? Why is my life like this? Why am I struggling so much? Why am I hurting? Why am I in pain? Why am I being put in this situation?" There are so many cries out for God during a season of waiting. And the thing is that it's not on our time, it's on his time. And I think I'm going to start with part of my story of my waiting season. When I first became a PA, this was in 2014, I had secured my first job even before I had gotten like the pass for my exam. And I was so excited to just start working, and I really wanted to find a job where I would stay there the rest of my career. I was very naive, but that's what I wanted. I really wanted to make a clinic my home where I could just see patients the rest of my life. That was literally the mentality that I had. And so this was in 2014. My husband and I were going to get married later that year, and we already knew pretty quickly that we wanted to have a family right away, and we wanted to start building a home. We had all of these dreams and all these plans that we had for our life. And so I passed my exam, of course. I get this job. I feel super excited because this physician was really well known here in our community, and I just felt it was such a privilege to be able to work for him, and everything was good. My first job was obviously such a huge learning curve. You go out into the real world and realize that you don't know anything. Very humbling, but I worked with a great PA, and The doctor was there a few times a week, and it was a great opportunity for me. During the season, my husband and I had decided that we were going to start building a home and we wanted to start having kids. We did end up getting pregnant and decided that we were going to proceed with building a home. The home was going to take about 4 to 5 months to get built. By the end of the year, my 1-year contract was coming up. I had a conversation with the physician because I wanted to make sure that my job was secure. This was maybe like in October, and my contract was going to be up in January. Christmas time comes around and I am pregnant with my first baby. And a week before Christmas, a month before my contract was up, my boss calls me in and tells me that I was going to get laid off pretty much because the clinic that I was working in could not sustain a second provider. And I remember feeling so crushed by this. I felt like, well, there goes all my plans. Here I am thinking I'm going to be at this job for 20 years or whatever. And yet I'm being let go. And it's not even a year. How is this possible? And it's a week before Christmas. So you can imagine my concern of this is the worst timing ever. But I'm also worried because I am pregnant and my husband and I were starting to build a home, and how that was just going to ruin this plan that I had. So, of course, I go into action and I look for another job. Within a week, I secure another job and I feel like, okay. Everything's going to be fine. The house was still getting built. If anybody has built a house before, you know how stressful it can be because they tell, don't change jobs, don't do this, don't do that. They check all these things. So I secure this other job and I start working there. And because I was so naive, I really did not know how to spot a red flag. I'm just going to say that right away. But I ended up being at that job for about 3 to 4 months. It was a startup. They had nothing organized. I jumped into it because, for one, I was about to be let go. I needed a job. Number 2, it was with a well-known company. I figured they have a good reputation. I should be fine. There's so many things about this job that, honestly, looking back, there was so many red flags. But I was new. I was naive. I didn't know any better. All I knew is that they were going to give me a raise, and the job seemed easy enough, so I might as well just go for it. And of course, I was also at a point where I was in a little bit of a desperate need because I needed to find a job to make sure that there was not going to be any issues with the whole house thing. But I ended up leaving that job after only about 3 to 4 months. I was really starting to feel the worry of what's going to happen. Why am I now looking for my third job and I've only been a PA for a year? How is this possible? But I had applied for a job that just took a really long time to go through the entire process, background check and credentialing. It was about 5 or 6 weeks where I was not working. I remember being home. I was pregnant and I was trying to keep up with the whole house construction because I had nothing to do. I was so bored. And I still remember having lunch with my husband when this call came through from the medical director of this other company. He called me to offer me the job, and I was so excited because we were praying for this opportunity. It was going to be a great salary, great benefits, and we really needed to have a job. The house was about to be finished. I was pregnant with my first baby, and I wanted it to work out. To make a really long story short, I ended up being in that job for about 2.5, almost 3 years. A week into that job, I ended up suffering a miscarriage, but we got pregnant later on that year, had our first child the following year in 2016. During this time, my husband had been working in a retail job. He was a store manager and he had been there for 10 years. And he had always expressed this desire to be a dad. And so when our first baby was born, I really saw my husband's eyes just change. His heart changed. He became this teddy bear version of my husband. He just really melted when he saw my son for the first time. And I saw how much it meant for him to be a dad. I remember he had to go back to work and he tells me, I don't know that I can be at this job anymore. The long hours, the weekends, holidays, and all that he had to work. He's like, I can't imagine leaving you and him by yourselves. I remember telling him one day, look, if you think that you need to leave that job, if you want to make a switch, I will support you. Whatever you want to do, I want to help you with it. That's why we're married. I made a vow to you. And whatever it is that you decide, I'll be behind you on it. He comes home from work and he tells me, I quit my job. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you quit your job? We just had a baby, I didn't think you were serious. So that was the start of this new season for us where I was really struggling with work. I didn't understand the plans that God had. I never saw myself as being somebody that would be the provider for the family. I had already had 3 jobs up to this point. And because I was a mom, I also felt this guilt that I wasn't spending the time that I should with my kids. And it became difficult because I was wanting to be supportive and help my husband as he went back to school. He was doing so much at home with my son, and we were about to have a second baby by 2017. I just really felt this isn't what I had planned. In 2017, I had started moonlighting at another job to make some extra income. And by the time that my second son was born, I actually went on maternity leave and decided not to return to that same company. Although the company was great, I really needed more flexibility as a mom. And 2018 was a wild year. I think the fact that I had a second baby sparked this thing in me that I didn't want to put up with people not valuing me. I was like, well, if I'm going to be at work instead of being with my babies, I need to make sure that I'm being valued at my job, because if not, then I'd rather just be home with my kids. So I started this new job, right? But to make a really long story short, there was things that were promised that were on my contract that were not done by the other party. Ultimately, I felt that because there was a breach in contract, I could no longer work there. I ended up leaving and working for this other doctor, and it was just a nightmare of a job. My anxiety was up the roof. During the season, I remember the most that I had this song called Breakthrough that I would listen on repeat. To this day, I can listen to that song and it takes me back to this time because it was such a difficult time. I felt like nothing was working. I felt like I wasn't good at work, and then I wasn't good at being a mom. I couldn't be at home with my kids because I had to be at work, but then I hated what I was doing at work. I was constantly having panic attacks. My boss was just extremely toxic and provided a horrible work environment. It was a really bad situation that I needed to get out of ASAP. During the time that I was there, I was applying for other jobs and really trying to do my best at securing another job. But during the season, I remember so heavily pressing on my faith and just being like, God, why are you putting me through this? Why am I going through so many jobs? I wanted to be at one job, and I've only been a PA since 2014, and here we are, it's 2018, and I had 5 jobs up to that point. What is going on? This is so unfair. I know of other people that have been at the same job for years, and here I am on my 5th job. Is it me? Am I not a good employee? What's going on? I've been so faithful. And I would just pray, and I would sing, and I would worship, and I would ask God to help me get through the season. God, I believe that you have greater plans than me, but help me get through this because I can't do it alone. Later that year, my husband finished with school. He ended up getting his first job as a teacher, and I had secured another job after that nightmare one. I felt like, oh, this is great. We're finally back to a 2-person income. The company that I was going to work for is a well-known company. It should be fine. And since I had been applying for jobs, I had actually had interest from other employers that wanted to hire me. By the end of 2018, I decided to quit full-time job altogether and become an independent contractor. I took a huge risk with it. I was working 3 jobs. They were all either part-time or PRN. And it was crazy, but it was also a lot of fun because it just gave me a little taste of everything, which was something for me that I enjoyed. If I counted correctly, I had a total of 8 jobs, and it was 2018. It was only 4 years into my career, and I constantly felt I was not where I was supposed to be, or why God was making me jump around from job to job, or what I was doing wrong and why I was struggling so much. It was a really difficult season, and I want to come back to the end of that after I go over the rest of the topics, because it's just to show you how sometimes the waiting can be a lot of trials and tribulations. And sometimes you don't understand why God is doing what he does. And sometimes you feel burdened. Sometimes you feel worried. Sometimes you have fear. Sometimes you doubt. Sometimes you want to just give up. But if you stay faithful, if you continue to just pray and stay connected to God, He will eventually show you His plan. But there's so much growth that happens in between. Going back to the waiting season, we forget that our time on earth is unlike His time. God is not limited by time. We must also remember that God is the creator of all things, that He knows everything about us, everything that's going to happen to our life, how we started and how it'll end. He knows what struggles we're going to face. He knows what joy we will get to experience. His timing is the perfect timing. This reminds me of the story of Lazarus in John 11. Lazarus was a friend of Jesus. His sisters were Mary and Martha. This is the same Mary that had wiped Jesus's feet with her hair. And Jesus loved them very much. In the story, Lazarus becomes sick, and it says, "So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. He then tells his disciples that they must go to Judea again and states, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him.' Then the disciples said, 'Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.'" His disciples here are thinking that Lazarus is really asleep and that he'll be fine. He'll be fine, Lord, let him be. But Jesus is actually talking about how Lazarus is already dead. So he makes his way to Lazarus, and Martha comes up to him and tells him how Lazarus is already dead and he's been in the tomb for 4 days. And Martha says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And here she's basically like, "Oh yeah, I know he'll be fine. He will rise again at the resurrection when he goes to heaven." But Jesus is like, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha?" Martha says, "Yes, Lord." So Jesus goes into the home and finds Mary, who falls at his feet as soon as she sees him and is crying and says, "If you had only been here sooner, my brother would not have died." At this time, Jesus is moved by Mary's reaction and feels compassion and starts to weep himself. And around them, there was also a lot of Jews that were there, and many did not believe, and they even said, "Could he not kept this man from dying?" Almost mocking him. If he's the Son of God, then shouldn't he have kept this man from dying? Jesus continues to the tomb and orders for the stone to be removed. And Martha says, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed in me, you would see the glory of God?" Jesus then lifts his eyes up and cries, "Father, I thank you for you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." And then Jesus commands Lazarus to come out of the tomb. There's so many lessons that we can learn from the story of Lazarus. The first is that Jesus delayed going to see Lazarus on purpose. In the story, it says he waited 2 days before even making his way to Lazarus. This demonstrates how he will make us wait as he did for Mary and Martha. The second is that he's already aware that Lazarus has died, but also knows that he's going to go and awaken him. This reminds us that he already knows what has happened in our life and what will happen in our life, because it's all according to his plan. The third is that he shows up after Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. This is so that he can use his power and he can get all of the glory for what's going to happen next. How many times have we been in a season of waiting where his plan or the answer to our prayers feels delayed? Maybe the situation feels dead, just like Lazarus was in the story, where it feels like there's no hope anymore. How many times have we cried out to God, explaining our situation almost by detail, as if he already doesn't know what's going on and what will happen in our life? How many times have we fallen into unbelief, like the Jews that were there mocking him for not arriving on time before Lazarus died? God is so patient with us. He knows what we will go through, all of the emotions during a waiting season. He knows that the timing is everything, that his timing will reveal the power and that he will get to have the glory. And that one day we are going to be like Lazarus and come out of those situations that we're praying for. In Habakkuk 2:3, it says, "This vision is for a future time. It describes the end and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. It will not be delayed. Let us be reminded that Noah waited 120 years from the time that he started building the ark to the time that it rained. Abraham waited 100 years for his son Isaac to be born. Daniel waited 70 years to see his people return to Jerusalem from captivity. And Jesus waited 30 years to start his ministry. All of those are reminders for us that it is in his time, not ours. So if God has a power and he has a plan, why not give it to us now? Like, why not give us the answer to our prayers right now? And there's 3 reasons for this. It's either to protect us, prepare us, or develop us. How we respond to delays is a test of our spiritual maturity. James 1:4 says, "So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, then you will be ready for anything, strong in character, full and complete." During a season of waiting, do not fear. Sometimes we fear the opinion of other people instead of what God wants. Sometimes we fear taking the first step. Sometimes we just don't act because of fear. As I was mentioning before with that last job that I ended up taking in 2018, it was a huge risk because I was letting go of a pretty stable full-time job to take a step into a whole unknown thing. And I took that step believing that God was preparing me for something else. By this time, I had gone through so much with these jobs that I realized God never let me go. I never needed anything. God always provided. So if I take this step, even though it is a crazy risk that I'm taking, I'm going to step out and believe that God will be with me and that he will carry me through that. Isaiah 41:10 says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God." The second thing to not do during a waiting season is to not be worried. Worry can sometimes put us in a victim mentality of complaining of what is going on. I can't believe I'm going through this. I can't believe this is happening again. I can't believe that I don't have this already or that I don't have that. During the times that I was going through so many jobs, I fell into this a lot where I was like, what is going on? I can't believe that I just lost another job. I can't believe that job didn't work out. I can't believe that here I am looking for jobs again and stressing out about all this stuff. I was worried. I was constantly worrying and fixing my eyes on the problem rather than fixing my eyes on him. During a season of waiting, I encourage you to practice gratitude. Where there is gratitude, there is no room for fear. After I took that job in 2018, I ended up staying there from 2018 until 2022. The end of that job was really stressful for me, as it was for a lot of healthcare providers because of COVID. I was working in family practice and everything up to that point had gone pretty well. I was getting paid really well. I had a pretty good schedule. I worked with good people, but COVID really changed that. I was getting burnt out and I felt like I couldn't say no to patients. And I felt this huge responsibility that honestly, I felt I couldn't even take time off for myself or for my health. And it was really starting to catch up with me. I was feeling really anxious and I was just putting myself on the back burner, putting my health on the back burner. I was taking work home all the time and it got really hard really fast. And during this time, I remember I had been actively looking for jobs and I would pray and I'd be like, God, show me where you want me to go, because right now I feel miserable where I am. If I continue down this road, something's going to happen. I cannot have these panic attacks. I was crying in the parking lot. I would dread going to work. And I remember there were situations where I just said, okay, I'm going to go to work and just do the best that I can do at my job. I'm just going to focus on serving other people. I'm going to focus on doing my job really well, because I felt that at that point, that was all I can do. I had no control over the situation. I had no idea what God was trying to do with my life. I had no idea whether I was in the right place at that point in my life. But I figured if I could just focus on the positive of the job and that I would focus on serving other people, that I could get through that difficult time. I remember at that time, I started journaling because I was going through the motions so bad. I took a journal to work. And before I would start my day, I would journal, and I started practicing gratitude, and I would put, today I'm thankful for, today I'm thankful for. And I just started to do that because it was the only way that I could get through that really difficult time. So when you're in a waiting season, I encourage you to pay attention to even the smallest details. Things like, thank you, God, for waking me up and giving me air in my lungs. Thank you for the food that you're putting on the table. Thank you for a bright and sunny day. During this time, I was pregnant with my third baby, and I had just found out that we were having a baby girl, and we were so excited. I really wanted to focus my attention on the things that were going well, because I knew all the things that were not going well. I knew all the struggles that I was dealing with. I knew all the stress that I was going through. I didn't understand God's plan. I didn't understand why I was unhappy again at this job, why I was feeling so miserable coming to work. But I needed to trust that God's plan was bigger than mine. What I was doing was just focusing on the small things, focusing on the things that were going well, and practicing gratitude every day. And fixing my eyes on Him was giving me the peace that I needed. Fixing my eyes on the fact that He wanted me to serve other people, to love other people, to be the best that I could be, to use my gifts that He had given me for good. And I focused on that, and it really got me through a really difficult time. And if you fix your eyes on Him, He will give you the peace that you need. The next thing is to not be discouraged in your season of waiting. This is when we question Him or our choices. Well, if I would have done this, and I wouldn't be in the situation. I had so much of that during this season. Maybe I shouldn't have left that other job. Maybe I should have just stayed there. Maybe I wasn't supposed to make this choice. Maybe I wasn't supposed to build a house. All these things where I was just questioning the things that were happening, and whether it was me blaming Him or me blaming my choices. But do not grow weary. Instead, pray and be consistent. I mentioned earlier about that breakthrough song. There was a lot of worship songs that were playing on my radio every morning on my way to work, because I was so miserable at work, but I did not want it to define the season of my life. I didn't want that season to be all negative. I had so much positive going on, and I was focusing too much on the negative, and I wanted to just focus on Him. I wanted to worship Him and thank Him for all the good that He had given me in my life. For me, that meant praying about it. It meant worshiping. It meant singing songs to Him. It meant practicing gratitude. It meant journaling and meditating on the things that were good in my life. In Galatians 6:9, it says, "And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not." There is a season for sowing and a season for reaping. God wants to know that you will be persistent in the sowing and the reaping before the harvest comes. Pray continuously so that you will not lose heart, and pray for persistence. Do not panic, instead pray. And the last thing you should do during a season of waiting is to not forget. By this, I mean, do not forget how much He has blessed you. How many times have you been in a season or are in a season of waiting, and you're overlooking all of the blessings that He's given you? Just because He's not answering that big prayer doesn't mean that He's not blessing you with other things. Don't forget the blessings that you are receiving every day. How many times has He rescued you? Have you forgotten when He saved you? For me, if I thought back at my life 10 years prior, I was nowhere near where I was at that time. Sure, I was having struggles with my job, but I wasn't that lost soul at the bars with the wrong relationship and feeling lost and broken. God had saved me from that. We shouldn't forget all of the things that God has done for us and how much He has saved us from and what He has rescued us from. When you are in a season of waiting and you're really feeling it, remember those things and be reminded of how much God loves you. Psalm 103:2 says, "Let all that I am praise the Lord. May I never forget the good things He does for me." Make a mental note right now of all of the things that God has done for you. What prayers has He answered? What has He helped you overcome? Remember that in your seasons of waiting. To finish out my story about my season of waiting, so I had applied for a job a year prior to leaving this last job, and I didn't get the job. And I felt so disappointed because I felt like everything was going to be perfect about this job. And here I was, nope, didn't get the job. So I stayed where I was, and I was just doing my thing, trying to stay positive, practicing gratitude, doing all of the things that I mentioned earlier, but really feeling it, really struggling. And one day, out of the blue, I get a message from my now boss, and he tells me that he wants me to go work for him. It wasn't me applying for the job. It wasn't me being desperate looking for jobs. Nothing specific had happened where I was looking for the job. No, this wasn't me asking and being persistent in my search for jobs. This literally came out of the blue. And I 100% believe that God did this for me. It was in his timing that this job presented itself when I was not expecting it at all. I say this because in my 10 years of being a PA, I had 10 jobs. And there was so many times that I just felt, why am I jumping from job to job? Why am I not able to have a job where I feel valued as a person? Why do I feel guilty for not being at home with my kids? The waiting season was so hard. But in retrospect, this is the thing that I 100% believe. If I had taken that job a year prior, I would not have valued it as much as I do now. There's so many reasons why I feel that God made me wait so long to get me to where I am now, to where I truly value the job where I'm at. God knew exactly what he was doing. If I had taken that job a year prior, I would not have valued the type of employer that I have. He is a great Christian man who has the same values as me. He understands the value of family and time. And 5 years ago, I didn't even value that. I was still in the hustle mentality of I need to make more money and I just need to pay my bills, instead of, do I really need to spend time with my family right now when I'm going to get paid more if I work more at this job? God is so good. He knows his plans, and his plans are greater than mine. And now that I have been at this job for 2 years, I'm just so thankful for those 8 years where I was going through ups and downs with my job. When I was feeling low, when I was going through panic attacks, I am so glad I continue to stay faithful and that I prayed, and no, it was not perfect. And yes, I doubted, and yes, I feared, and yes, I worried, and yes, I forgot all of the good things that God did for me at times. The waiting season is not easy, but I'm so thankful to have been through all of that, because I grew in spiritual maturity in those years. And I realized in a very personal way the hand of God in everything that I've been through in the past 10 years, not only with my jobs, but with my family, my health, my kids, my marriage, with everything. God's hand has been on everything. And I'm so grateful. And I'm here to encourage you that yes, the waiting season is hard. You're going to have trials and tribulations. And yes, God is going to help you grow, and you're going to mature spiritually during this time. Continue to wait on the Lord. Do not fear. Do not worry. Do not be discouraged. And do not forget all of the blessings that he's given you. If you find yourself in a situation right now where you are waiting on the Lord for the next move, for him to answer your prayers, for him to heal you or somebody else, whether that's your health or an addiction, or if you're waiting on that calling on your life, whatever it is, the waiting season is an opportunity to grow. Take that as an opportunity to get closer to God, to be persistent in prayer. As somebody that, looking back, can see how a waiting season can produce so much fruit if you just stay obedient and if you just stay close to God. I feel like in my current waiting season, I go into it with so much more joy and hope and encouragement, because I've seen how much God has moved in my life. If I've seen him do it once, he's going to do it again. If you can think back at the things that God has saved you from, if you can think back at the time that you encountered Jesus for the first time, if you can look at something around you right now and be thankful for something, then be encouraged, because God will do it again. God will know when it's the right time for him to deliver you from whatever it is that you are praying about. To end, encourage you, make it a point to get closer to God, whether that is through reading the word, prayer, worship, getting involved with your church, going to a Bible study, a small group, whatever it is that you need to do, be persistent and to not fear and to not be worried. I know for me, it is a daily thing that I have to focus on. If I wake up and fix my eyes on God, I know that He knows better for me than I do for myself. Then that's all it takes. That's all that matters. And I hope that today's episode has blessed you. If you know somebody that's in the waiting season and really going through it, share this message with them. And if you need some prayer, send me a DM, an email, and I'd be happy to pray for you. Like always, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to this channel. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I would really appreciate if you could leave me a review to let me know how I'm doing. Thanks again for listening to this episode. By the time I edit this podcast, you probably will not know that my battery ran out twice already. I had to go and get a battery for my camera, and then I had to go get batteries for my recorder, and I did not let that stop me from finishing today's episode. And there's something else that I want to share with you guys. Just today, I bought my second microphone because the interviews are definitely coming. It's been something that's been on my heart, and I have been thinking about who I want to bring on to this podcast. And I have a few ideas, but I can't wait for what's to come, and we'll see you guys at the next one. Bye.